Hey everybody, video here for you today. We're going to talk about a place that certainly goes with a lot of stories I've done over the past couple months while I've been stuck at home. We're going down to ancient Jericho today. Here's ancient Jericho today, kind of out on the end of a point right down here. But this ancient settlement is called the oldest town in the world by some. This goes back 12,000 years occupation here, the earliest. But there is a look at it from overhead. This is called Tel Jericho or Tel es-Sultan in the Arabic language. Of course, people are familiar with the biblical story from here, but I'm more interested in the history here that goes back 12,000 years. Let's go down and take a look around. Here's a look down on Street View, the modern neighborhood, and then the 12,000-year-old mound here. And this is just built up over thousands of years of occupation. Imagine living in the same place for thousands of years. Here you can see the stonework kind of in the layering here of the mound. Different levels here. Probably represents thousands of years of occupation here. Here we are kind of down at the other end. Get an idea how large the mound is here, set in a modern neighborhood. There's a look at it, and that's where I first showed you, right down there by that power pole. Here's a view from up on top of the Tel, overlooking the city here. Some of the ruins right down here. Probably the most recent, right on top. And then over this way, you have the areas where it's been excavated, and you can look down into the ancient ruins here, right here and right here. Here's the view from kind of the visitors area, where you can look down into 12,000 years of history here. See the walls built up, the living areas, different things here. Pretty cool. Here is one area where they excavated. Could be from a more modern era than the late 10, 12,000 years ago times. I'll give you a look. Stonework, some basins of some sort, steps, different things here. Here's an area that has been excavated. Stonework down here, steps, different things. People have been living on this mound or lived on this mound for probably at least 10,000 years. One of the heaviest occupations started around 1550 BC, and I talked about that 4 years ago quite extensively. Why was that? The Hyksos lost a war to the southern Egyptians. They were expelled out of Egypt. 250,000 of them went north. Jericho was one of the places they came to, some of these people, and that's when the city started thriving. Here's a scene from the biblical story, Joshua and the Ark. Here's a pic from over 100 years ago, so-called walls of Jericho here. Here's a look from 1931, an aerial view before the city really got flourishing here. But here is the ancient Tel Jericho, the most famous and ancient places in the area here. The history of Jericho goes back to the Younger Dryas period. There was some pretty cool artifacts found here, but this must be a treasure trove for archaeologists trying to learn about many different periods of history here. Here's a website, shows some ancient ruins of Jericho. The walls of Jericho here talks about it being occupied from before 9,000 BC up until a few thousand years ago. Talks about a long plastered ramp, Hyksos type. And who were the Hyksos? They were the people that exited out of Egypt about 1600 BC, came up to this region. Jericho was one of the places that they came to and lived in. Here is that area built maybe 3,500 years ago when the Hyksos came up here, when they left in a mass exodus from Egypt. This resembles certain things in Avaris from the Nile Delta, where these people came from. I was glad to find this website, updated last just a couple months ago. It talks about the ancient ruins here, the pre-pottery Neolithic, that goes back 10, 12,000 years. Talks about a tower. I believe this is the base of it here. It would have towered 30 feet over this ancient city at the most ancient time of occupation. And that really caught my eye because I made this video back in March here. Tel Caramel and the 12,000-year-old Younger Dryas towers. Why were they building towers in these very old places? Seems they wanted to watch the skies. That's what makes the most sense to me. There were some really interesting artifacts going back to the Neolithic period, the oldest occupation of the site here. It says people invented plaster during the Neolithic period by burning limestone. The new material was used in daily life for cultic practices. A new tradition also appeared then. that of plastering skulls of the deceased, which were removed after burial when the flesh had decayed. The face was molded onto the skull with plaster, and shells were placed as eyes and lined with bitumen. Here's another skull found at the site. It says these skulls were kept inside houses, therefore they may represent an ancestral cult. Pre-pottery Neolithic went from 8800 BC to 6900 BC. This is found in Jericho. Here's a website I will leave below. Reconstruction from ancient skull reveals what humans look like 9,500 years ago. Here is one of those skulls found in ancient Jericho with the plaster over it and the shells for eyes. Here's a facial reconstruction of what they think these people look like here. Here is a skull that was dated to 9,200 years ago. Other possible evidence of cult practices was discovered in several homes of the pre-pottery Neolithic town in the form of plastered human skulls, which are molded over to resemble the living heads. Shells were used for the eyes. Traces of paint revealed that skin and hair were also included in the representation. The largest group found together were 9 examples buried in the fill below the plastered floor of one house, coming from about 9,000 years ago. Pretty fascinating place, Jericho. Many different periods of history here. But I think I'll end it there. I'm going to have a video coming up a little later today. There's a very important site in Turkey. I think it's about time to tell you who built that site. That'll be coming up later. Hope you thought that was cool, and you all have a very safe day.